have no idea what time it is down and under, but it is time for Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. So I hope you have your tinfoil hat all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mecky.
Hello and welcome to Shiny Side Out with
Dave
and Mecky on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio, radio, where it's more than just radio. So jump in the chat room if you can. And it's really quite lively in there. Solaris just had an awesome show. We'll get to that in a second. This is show number 430. Not so easy to do my way, but 0, 3, and 400 doesn't sound good. Talking about ancient tech. We're going to talk about lots of ancient tech. We're going to talk about agriculture and also China and India if we get to it. It's on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. And we are saying this because it appears on the default list, revolution.radio. You can just pick it as a default programmed entity. If you missed Solaris' show, shame on you. She had a roundtable, and it was pretty much talked about everything, which was awesome. It's actually really good to listen to. And if you have missed it, and I probably caught the last half hour, and I wish I had caught more, you can just pay $5, and that will give you access to all of her archives, so you can listen to her show after the fact. Not just her show, everybody's show, including ours. So if you miss our show or you don't catch it on the rerun, you can go to the archives for $5 a month and go ahead and listen there. Now, this is listener-funded radio, so please go ahead and support us if you can. You can buy some merchandise from the website. You can buy the station's merchandise. Also, you can click through to the sponsors and get some cool things there. Now, before we get started here, we're doing the same thing that the Australian Parliament does, and then it promptly, in my mind at least, sort of invalidates it with a little paternoster. But, it's okay. And we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. For me, it's the Darug people here in Pemulwuy, and for Dave,
Dark and Young.
He's up in Narara. And yes, there were 4 Aboriginal phrases in that. We're going to talk about quite a bit about that in the upcoming hour. And we would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And we are warning, I would like to warn our Aboriginal listeners, if there are any out there, that we may be talking about deceased people. And just want to also clarify that we mean this in no disrespectful way.
Absolutely.
But we are going to make reference to people that are no longer with us. And this is a culturally sensitive issue for a number of peoples around the world.
And on YouTube, there may be some images of those who have passed.
Correct. Now, so it has been hey, crazy week again. I want to share with you just very quickly. No, again, I'm not going to go into what is happening here. Something is happening. People are sick. People are dying. Economies are, in helter-skelter uproar. In my opinion, Dave, I still believe this is an orchestrated economic effort to redistribute the wealth from the middle class to the top class.
To the ultra wealthy.
They've taken, yeah, that's right.
Skip everyone in between.
Skip everyone in between. Take from the inconsequentially rich to give to the consequentially rich. If you are consequentially rich, if your activities can influence the stock market, that's when you've made it. And we're just in the middle of a massive redistribution of wealth yet again. And it's probably the biggest one.
Yeah, even the stock market crashed again.
Again, and the thing is this, it's not a loss until you sell. So if you're a mom and pop investor and you're holding some shares and you've got a portfolio, good for you. Don't sell in a panic. Okay, because you will get cents in the dollar and somebody's going to make money, not you. So this redistribution we see now is astounding, right? It's I think I wrote about this recently. It is no longer enough for the for the have-mosts to have most. They now want to have it all. They want to be the have-it-alls. Not the have-it-most.
That's right.
Have-it-alls. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And with impunity. Go on.
Nah, look, what I want to say, because this is great. We'll get to the headlines in a minute. You're absolutely right. And every time I watch the news, I'm seeing this narrative. I'm seeing the narrative that, you know what, you stay in your box. Like, we've rebuilt your box. It's much smaller than before. But that tiny houses feeling. Well,
but also less comfortable, huh?
There's less things to worry about. Look, I've got my piece of brain in a jar. They let me keep it. So they're giving us lobotomies, pretty much metaphorically.
They're free. That's okay.
And they're allowing us to adjust to this. But I'm just going to say this out loud. There are some countries that are doing it willingly, and there's some that are resisting this effort to squeeze us into a smaller box.
Yep.
And that's plainly evident.
Well, you just have to, hold your breath a bit longer. But, truly evil would be if they made you pay for the lobotomy. That would be truly evil. Okay.
Hey, wait. Does anyone watch free-to-air television anymore, Mackie? I make the point. Right? Yeah. So I think we're being slowly lobotomized anyway by our consumption of media, whether it's social media, which is, remember, filtered. It's absolutely filtered. What you send, what you think your friends see when you post something, isn't being seen by them, or very few of them see it. So that's filtered. It's filtered. I don't want to slam social media because I see the benefits of it, and we live in an age where it's the primary news source now for people. But it aggravates me so bad that look at me. Sorry, you have become aggravated. It says in the chat room. Hi, me in the chat room. It gets me so aggravated that people can't see it. It's like when Woody Allen in Sleeper gets reprogrammed by the government and his girlfriend, his love interest, walks in the room. He ends up marrying in real life. And she's of age. That's funny. So when she walks in, he's so conditioned. He says to the robotic dog named Wags, "Sick 'em, Wags. Sick 'em." And because he can't see anything, but he sees a real dog. He doesn't see a robot dog. And these were his friends. Now they're strangers. These are part of the rebellion, the rebel uprising, the secret people to the secret army. So very funny scene. But you know what? George Orwell wrote it well. I think it was been replayed many times in science fiction. This is what's really happening to us. And all these predictions. Becky, did you see? Before we take on the news, you saw the John Cleese thing that I posted?
Yeah, I did. That was funny.
How on point is that?
Yeah, of course it is.
It's clearly saying that. I think that the overall picture he's saying is that whichever way you cut and dice, where you exist on a two-dimensional line that's either extreme left or extreme right, or you're middle, or you're anywhere in between, it's irrelevant, that you see everyone on either side of you as the enemy, because you've chosen to take a position on it, and now you automatically have enemies, but you can smile to yourself knowing that they're not sharing your opinion, and that makes them your enemy. And that's that divide and conquer thing we see between the Clinton News Network and the Foxworthy Network. Right? So when the auto thing that makes the text in YouTube will see that and try to make sense of it. I see immediate left and immediate right, and I see them at war against each other, but they're doing that to entertain their own audience. Think about that. There's no middle news that doesn't want to entertain anybody, because it's paid news now, right? They pay for advertising, and advertising's sold, and people want to be part of it. So they entertain their listenership with a specific kind of point of view, and that keeps them happy. But it makes enemies of everybody else. And I see that, man, and that's the thing that John Cleese said so eloquently, rather than just me ranting.
Yeah, but I actually did a paper on this back in uni. We are fundamentally not defined by what we are. We choose to define ourselves by what we're not. And it's a really funny it's a really funny philosophical conundrum. I mean, most people, you would think, and I want you to all think about this for yourselves as well. You would think that most people define themselves by what they are. I'm Anglo-Saxon, or I'm African American, or I'm of South Indian descent, or I'm tall, I'm short, I'm fluent in 50 languages, etc., etc. That's not the case, though. That's not how we That's not at all how we identify ourselves.
I'm able-bodied. I'm challenged. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we identify ourselves by what we're not. So we look at a group of people. Oh, I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm not that. Beautiful. And that's how we create, as Dave has pointed out, our enemy pictures. The conflict in Rwanda. Yeah, the conflict in Rwanda. You'd be hard pressed to understand what happened, because it was between the Tutsis and the Hutus, right? And they're both African. They're black African people. That's what they are, right? And you know what the difference between them was, Dave? I think I spoke about this before. One tribe or one ethnic grouping was generally taller than the other. And the British are clearly to blame it, because they put one group in charge of the other in colonial times, and it's always been a bit of one-upmanship since then. I mean, it doesn't excuse the Rwandan genocide, but it explains what happened. We will find something to define ourselves against.
Yeah.
If we were all beige and we all had brown eyes, we'd find something. Oh, your hair is curlier than mine. You are not me. Or
your hair's longer.
You speak with a slight lilt. We would the experiment in the States. It's called the wave, right? A teacher was talking about Nazi Germany, and this actually happened. And the kids were going, "How is this impossible? This could never happen in America. Only Germany, whatever." And the Germans had quite a good history in this regard. My own ancestors, Ukrainian Jews, as I learned recently doing some ancestry digging of my own, emigrated from the Ukraine, which was then of course Russia, to Germany back in the 19th century. And back then that was a good idea for a Jew. To go from the Ukraine to Germany.
Yeah.
Not so much in the 1930s. And Germans really weren't those kinds of people. I mean, they weren't massive anti-Semites. I mean, of course, it was an European thing, anti-Semitism, but Germany wasn't really renowned for it. I mean, Russia was much worse. Austria was pretty bad, generally speaking. The French and the English even. But anyway, so. The American school kids said, "No, impossible, can't happen, no, never, blah blah blah," and the teacher said, "Okay, well let's do this then." And he conducted this experiment. And he did it by eye color, all the green-eyed over there and all the blue-eyed over there, and something like that. And it actually got so bad within weeks that people got physically hurt.
Yeah.
By this artificial segregation into the blue-eyed and the green-eyed, and so this actually happened. And prison experiments. Whenever you put someone in charge of someone else, whenever you tell someone they're better than someone else, right, it will end in tears. Okay, and someone is going to walk away limping. It's a terrible thing that we have in ourselves. Not everybody, right? Not the vast majority. I think it's the vast majority, right? A few of us can resist this. Dave, racism and bigotry, ethnicity-based discrimination, sexism, any of those things,
you name it,
have been with us from the beginning, as far as we know, and they will be with us until the end. This is not a black and white issue, and I mean this in all the senses of the word. It's a completely gray or even beige issue, if you want to go there, right? It's because racism is not between a white person and a black person. Racism is between anybody who is not something else. Right? It's astounding. I've seen it. I've traveled the world. I've seen racism in all its forms. I myself, you look at my picture on my various internet profiles, you think, what kind of racism could you possibly expose to? You're a white person with green eyes.
Snowflake. That's right.
Snowflake.
Yeah.
Except I'm off-white, right? Slightly. And
I have olive skin.
Racism. Yeah, well, in Germany, I was the child of a Turkish man and a German woman in the 60s.
Yeah.
You do the math. but the point is, there was only the one of me. There were Turks, yes, and there were Germans, yes, but there weren't any German Turks. So I was completely alone, always. And it gives you a very, very specific point of view. And I'm grateful for that point of view. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had that point of view all my life. But racism and the fear this is really fear. The fear of the unknown, or the fear of change, or the fear that someone is going to bring something into your community that will change it, which is a bad thing. Change is always bad, we all know that. Then this is what it is, Dave. It is this fear, and sometimes it's fear that's induced, it's stoked, it's grown, it's harvested, right? As the Nazis did with the Jewish population, just leading up to the pogroms there. But it happens everywhere. I mean, look at why is America in such a bad way, right? And why is Australia not in a bad way? And you can discuss this, for hours and hours. America is in a bad way because slavery, which, by the way, is still a phenomenon that we are suffering from today. There's still slaves in the world.
It's like 30 million. 30 million slaves.
30 million. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Globally, right? Today, right now. It was, so slavery was a big component part. But what people forget is that African nations were getting rich, and African dynasties were getting rich by selling slaves to the French, the English, the Americans, the Spanish.
Anyone who was sailed by.
Anyone. Yeah, and the slave trade is much older than the United States. It's much older, in fact, I would say, than any civilization that we know. Rome, without slaves, is unthinkable. The slaves built Rome. In fact, it got so bad, the slavery component in Rome, that the free workers, the people that actually did, like free Roman citizens, they went on strike. They said, no more slaves. They're taking our jobs. It sound familiar? It's just it's insanity.
That's it. So I want to wrap this back up again, right? So a new headline section to just tapping off the beginning of the show, and then we have a number of topics here, Mackie. 2020 in a snapshot. We're going to talk about the world has gone mad. Australian PM rewritten history, and that's sort of a segue from what you were talking about. The USA demands Prince Andrew turns up and starts talking about Epstein. And there's some latest stories now about North versus South Korea, and that's escalating. It's crazy times. So I just want to. I just want to start. So 2020, Mackie, has been, and every single week that we do the show, some more things are added in. But I want to remind everyone. So we had fires, like it rounded out the fires for us. Then we got floods, and then the coronavirus thing started peaking. Locust plagues, superstorms, murder hornets.
I love that one. That's a murder. Is that a movie or what? Come on.
I know, got to be a movie in that, right? So murder hornets, yeah. So they just go into a bee's nest and just kill everything in the nest just to get the honey. Then they fly away. Completely useless kind of parasitic behaviour, because that means they're always destructing where they go, and eventually they'll run out of food. So it's stupid. Black Lives Matter. Absolutely, completely agree. I don't just agree that Black Lives Matter. All lives matter from my point of view. And I know people have been shot down for saying that. And I'm not trying to say that, and no, everyone is, has different perspectives and have lived a harder life. Not saying that no one's lived a harder life than anyone else. I care, but I think all lives matter. And I think our laws could do better by not discriminating in our laws. Yeah.
Continue your list. I want to go back to.
You can go back to it, absolutely, because then we can segue off it. The riots, crazy rioting, and from a redder crowd rioting too, with pallets of bricks just laid down in advance so that they could toss them. If you've seen this video, so citizen reporting there. Our tanking economies. Our economies are not going to survive easily through this. It's going to be extremely tough times coming out. And I just did a Trump signal with my hand when I was talking there, or build a wall. Escalating war with China. That's going crazy. There's now sanctions, and it's endless. And now there's Huawei things with the chipsets, and that's not going away. Canada's now has put them on the list, the ban list as well as the US has been there, and I wish that would go away. Now the silent passing of bills through our parliaments, both in the US and Canada, in England, and here in Australia. That's what? Just secret, because all this other stuff takes the headlines, and you don't see any of these bills getting passed unless you're,
Oh,
focusing specifically on it.
but we've seen this many times, and the last time we saw it this blatantly was in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks.
Oh, 9/11, Port Arthur as
Oh,
well.
Port
yeah,
Arthur.
that's right.
Port Arthur was a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into this, but I'm going to honest this. But thank you, Dave, and you're right. You just enumerated a massive amount of things that you would think could happen in a decade.
Yeah.
Fires, floods, coronavirus, like plagues, then locusts. I mean, not just locusts. These were the worst locusts. Still are locusts.
Yep, still going. It's all going. That's right.
Yeah, like 30 million people, now maybe 100 million people are looking at complete food shortages, right, etc., etc.
They'll be like locust refugees.
Yeah, look, exactly.
They have to move it on because they won't have any food.
100%. We're looking at these extreme weather events and just economies. It's I mean, this is a perfect storm. Now, I just want to quickly go back to BLM because it's topical and people have a misunderstanding, or some people might feel different, and I get that. I understand why people feel differently about this, and say all lives matter. Sure. Having said that, what we have and what we're facing today, and this is maybe we should extend this. And when we say Black Lives Matter, I think what we need to say is Indigenous life.
Yes.
But this is also not true, because in North America, in South America, in Australia specifically, those four. I mean, there are others. Nobody ever talks about the Ainu in Japan, but let's not go there for a second. So the indigenous people have a raw deal in most European colonized or European originated countries.
All of the colonizers.
Right? Yeah.
Treating everyone badly.
Yeah. So except again, New Zealand is an exception because they actually fought and they won. But the point here is, and I guess Vietnam is anyway. But the point here is that these are all indigenous people that are suffering greatly. America, the Aboriginal people of Australia, like I said, then you've got the original inhabitants of South America as well as the Africans, right? On top of that, though, you've got a compounding problem here, which is the imported underclass with the slaves, indentured labor, whatever it might be, right? And the British did a lot, the French, everybody did it. Nobody's free from this sin, which adds another dimension, right? And African slaves as a heritage, right? So you have compounding issues here. Now, Black Lives Matter, yes, and what we're seeing here is the issue of institutionalized racism. Racism in itself is a fundamental human thing. I don't know if we can ever get rid of it. What we need to get rid of here is institutionalized racism, where it is okay, where the law and even the government turn a blind eye and say it's okay to kill a person of color, a person that's an indigenous person. That's okay, and it seems to be okay because in Australia we had more than 400 indigenous people that were killed since a 1991 Royal Commission into this very issue. None of the Commission's findings were implemented, by the way. Not a one, zero.
No.
And I listened to Q&A the other night, and it's an ABC really confronting kind of a roundtable, if you will. A couple of Aboriginal people in there, artists, writers, the parents of a couple of Aboriginal people that got killed were there as well, asking questions. And what the Aboriginal lady and gentleman said was very simple. Very simple. Don't kill us. All we are asking you is to not kill us. We just want to ever, and this is what the article is going to be about that I'm about to write. For the first, we get a bit of a preview here. For the first time ever in the history of the world, we are now able to immediately witness all of the things that are going on, and the murder of George Floyd. We call that a snuff film. I will call it a snuff film again. We watched the murder of George Floyd unfold real time, and it was broadcast around the world real time. Technology has now given us such transparency. And this is a good thing, it's a bad thing. I mean, but again, in and of itself, it has no value judgment. It's what you do with it, right? If we didn't have this technology, that the social media, right? The social activism online, the bandwidth that we have, right? Because it requires bandwidth to stream videos, just make no mistake about it. And the mobile devices, everybody has a camera, everybody has a mobile device of some sort, or most people do, right?
Citizen journaling.
Yeah, exactly. In some countries, in fact, it's the preferred way of communication. In India, nobody puts it on copper lines anymore. It's all towers and cell phones because it's just cheaper to do, right? And more effective. It is astounding. It is astounding what we can do these days. And what we saw, and this is why this is not finishing. It's not ending. Because we are seeing it real time. We see an old man, a white guy. This was a white guy being pushed by a policeman to the ground, cracks his head, bleeds from the ears.
Almost immediately, blood's coming out of his ears. And they take a look, and he says blood's coming out of his ears, and they walk on.
They walk on. They've been suspended. Or if no one had filmed it, they wouldn't have been suspended.
That's right.
Because it is being captured now. We saw a young black woman being tasered for no good reason. Pulled out of her car. We are seeing these things. People are getting shot still, right? But now we're seeing it. And that's why they stopped the reporting of the Vietnam War. They saw the coffins coming back. Imagine if they had reported what actually happened in Vietnam.
That's
imagine,
right. Yeah.
Imagine all the GIs and all the Viet Cong having cell phones in the Vietnam War. The war would have been over in a week.
Yeah, GoPros. Yeah,
that's
exactly
done. This is the new reality we have here. This is the new reality, and because it is now broadcast across social media, which doesn't care, doesn't have a moral center, doesn't really. Well, it started censoring things, right?
Straight away, right?
But other platforms will spring up, Dave, Tor, the darknet, whatever, and you will still reach the vast majority of human race. Forget CNN and BBC and Fox News. Who gives a hoot?
Mickey,
they are yesterday's dinosaurs.
You're right. So we had a delayed reaction to the commercial media outlets when they published something. We had to wait for our opportunity for how our words republished in the newspaper in column 8, for instance, and we aligned ourselves with those media outlets. Now that we can actually say our true feelings and use expletives to our heart's content, whether we disagree, whether we're only seeing a photograph and disagreeing, or know the full story and disagreeing, or you find arguments and people, backwards and forwards trolling each other, and then the people, paid, what do they call the 50-cent army? You see those people doing and saying things and polarizing your community. However, citizen journalism is showing you what's really going on. It's the gritty front line, and you're getting instead of there being a filter, we can't run that story, it's too graphic. We're seeing it, and we're in there. Mackie, the one I want to take us to the Scott Morrison piece here, and that is all of because it ties in. It's a segue from the Black Lives Matter. Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, said quite clearly, no slavery in Australia.
What a load of crock. We know that 60,000 slaves were imported. It's just a fact.
Yeah, that's right. So he decided, in my view, to rewrite Australian history books as he claimed that there was no slavery. Wrong.
What about the Irish?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it started with the use of convicts as slaves. Because they weren't paid, they were only fed. And then we stole Pacific Islanders to use as slaves, and we separated the First Peoples' children from their parents and placed them in white care to eat white food and attend white school. That's what we did. That's called the stolen generation in Australia. Then we chained together work gangs of Aboriginals, and they had white owners, and there's a picture in the news article that I got on screen. A historian decided, you know what, he's wrong. He said, when you capture people and put chains around their necks and make them walk 300 kilometres and then set them to work on a cattle station, what's that called? He questioned the Prime Minister's beliefs.
So it's a labour migration program.
That's what it is. Then our PM decided to backtrack and said, oh no, there was no slaves in New South Wales. Buzzer sound, wrong again.
There were no slaves in Parramatta.
So this came from another historian. He said to use the term being thrown about these days at our PM. Oh, that's me. That's an Ed. Snowflake. I want to call him one as well because I called you one, Mickey, and I'd be one if we weren't in this. If we were only social media saying, but it's such a hard life for them. But you've had a gold spoon in your mouth. So in the early days, it was called blackbirding, and this was when, say, the lady who I know I've been to Vanuatu, Mickey. I'm sure you've been too. It's an island just off the coastline of Australia, and what they said was happening was the beaches where thousands of boys and young men were kidnapped, tricked or coerced onto boats, and taken roughly 2,000 kilometres to Australia. They were forced to work on sugarcane plantations. Many never returned home. And it happened about 150 years ago, but many people are still struggling to come to terms with it, says the Vanuatu elder. Tens of thousands of Pacific Islanders, Mickey, throughout Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands also became caught up in the trade. It started in 1847, by a New South Wales grazier.
Yeah.
And 16 years later, the idea to import Pacific labour was picked up further north in Queensland. So to think that it never happened is, well, you know what I thought, Mickey? I thought that his view, rather than he thinks he's rewriting it, he just never learnt about it.
No, look, he may not have learned about it. He may be willfully ignorant, but the truth is, a lot of people don't know history, and it's a terrible thing. Especially if you hold a public office, you need to understand your country in order to not just live in it, but govern it. How can you possibly understand your place in the world if you don't understand where you came? Look, I'm not saying we should all beat our chest and say, "Oh, mea culpa," my fault. It's all bad. Please forgive me. No, but look, I'd like to think maybe that some of us would have acted differently if we were on that time, but most of us probably wouldn't have, depending on the color of our skin, or our station, or our relative wealth. We might have just been part of the system. I'm serious, right?
It was the start at the time, Becky.
March along, Jerry. March along.
Yeah.
In goose step formation, right? I mean, we cannot, and this is the next point that you have here, Dave, and I really want to spend a little bit of time on it. We are now in the throes of reductive revisionism. We're trying to rewrite history, and you've put it very beautifully here. And the world is gone mad yet again, and then things have been removed from streaming service. And you've mentioned all of Chris Lilly's work. We Can Be Heroes, Summer Heights, Angry Boys, etc., Faulty Towers. Right? Don't mention the war episode. Cops, Live PD, Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind. So I've got to go back up to that story. Yeah,
The Mighty Bush, The League of Gentlemen, etc. But you know what? You know what we don't focus on here? How far we have come.
Yeah.
How far we have come. We need to I remember when I was a child in Germany, black and white movies were my favorite, and I liked Charlie Chan.
Right? Yes.
And there were no Asian actors and actresses in
Hollywood. No, they were played by Western actors, yeah.
Peter Lorre played
That's
Charlie
right.
Chan. Horrible and very demeaning kind of, Asian caricature makeup, right? But that was the time. That was what it was. In Shakespeare's time, there were no women allowed on stage. All the men dressed up as women. Okay? And my point here is, as a people, as the human race, let's call us, we have moved along the stream of time, and we've done things, and then we did other things, and then there was Enlightenment and the Renaissance, and there was humanism, and all of a sudden people mattered. We had the union movements, industrial revolutions, etc., etc. But it was a thing that we developed. We made mistakes. We're not perfect, but if we don't remember where we came from, if we completely, taking down statues. I get it. Okay, sure, do it, but don't burn books. Don't ban movies. You keep them as markers of time. You do not get rid of them. And you remember the pioneers, because no one's talking about this. When William Shatner, and I don't know her name, she played Uhura, Lieutenant Uhura.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
African-American woman. He kissed her. This was 1960s TV.
And that was...
Captain Kirk kissed Uhura, Lieutenant Uhura.
That's right.
And there was, oh my God, should we do
there
it?
Was
Shouldn't
an
we do
uproar.
it? They almost pulled the episode. Guess who's coming to dinner, right? Sidney Poitier.
Yes.
African American, goes home with this lily white girl to meet her parents. This was a movie. This was in the 50s, I think.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about these are like momentous things that happened. I mean, before that, who would have thought of a black leading man in Hollywood?
No,
Completely
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, women doing things unthinkable. Asians. Bruce Lee. Sorry, Dave. Bruce Lee was denied the lead role for Kung Fu, which was given to David Carradine.
Yes.
Because he looked too Asian. Bruce Lee was denied the role of a half Chinese Kung Fu expert in the Wild West because he looked too Asian. That's insanity.
I know,
but
right?
It happened.
Did anyone see how many Chinese there were in the goldfields?
It was. You throw a rock and you hit 5.
To be honest, it was absolutely crazy with multi-race living. It was probably the most multicultural we'd ever been at that point. Even compared to all the trading centers. Mickey, I want to say this: Gone with the Wind. It's the most. It has to be this to line up with what you're saying. It's got to be the stupidest idea because didn't the black actress get an Academy Award?
Yeah, and you're right. As you said, I think it was the first time ever.
Yeah, it was.
Right.
And look, Little Britain, if you know that, even Amazon is considering pulling the whole series of Dukes of Hazzard. I know I wrote that in there because it's out of the list. There's hundreds out of the list of all those things. I grew up with Dukes of Hazzard. I don't even remember seeing anything in there. I don't remember any of it, right? It's because of the Confederate flag on the roof.
Yes.
And NASCAR is now saying they're banning the Confederate flag from use on any of the NASCAR vehicles or any advertising.
Yeah.
What? Wait. Look, I'm aware of what it means. I know what it's symbolizing. But it's like saying we're going to ban Che Guevara t-shirts, Mackie.
But where does it stop, Dave? I mean,
that's
go back far enough in time.
Yep.
But I mean, the thing is this, and I want everybody to understand this. This is really, really important to understand. Are they victims? Absolutely, they're victims. But you know what? This is a funny thing, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. And it's okay.
Here we go.
I dig it. But this is realism. I want to give you some realpolitik here. In the world, you switch from victim to brutalizer in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. And I want to say, I'll give you this example. I know people will hate me for it, but I will give you this example because it's pertinent and it makes my point beautifully. In the Holocaust, some 6 million Jews perished, along with millions of others, communists, gays, gypsies. Millions and millions were killed, right? I think that is beyond dispute. I went to the concentration camps myself, my family. Even though we weren't considered Jewish at the time because we'd been in Germany so long, and I guess my ancestors turned to converted to Christianity. We almost ended up in Auschwitz for other reasons, not because of any. But the point here is, it's a thing, and now what we're seeing is Israel, the state of Israel, which is not a Jewish state per se, right? It's really as far away from the religious Jewish ideal as it could possibly be. It's actually it's a socialist construct.
Yeah, right.
The kibbutzim movement grew out of. But the point is, the very same tactics and the very same treatment we see now visited upon the Palestinians, right? I mean, the Palestinians, to no fault of their own, lived in Palestine for a few thousand years. After World War II, all of a sudden, there's this massive influx of Jewish people from mostly Europe, but not only, and a lot of money coming in as well. And there was power struggle, and lo and behold, the Jewish people, I guess that movement won out and created the state of Israel, much to the disadvantage of the Palestinians.
That's right.
Right. But we're saying the same. So yes, did the Jews suffer? Yes, and they've suffered for centuries, millennia. But is that any reason to now visit the same suffering upon the Palestinians?
Absolutely not.
Do we need to? No. But you know what?
We turn a blind eye to all of that violence.
Of course. But tomorrow it might flip again, and you know, let's say some horrible thing happens and the state of Israel is gone, and the Palestinians might now visit the same kind of thing upon the Jews that are in the area.
You almost said Israelites then.
Yeah, I know, almost. But you know, the funny thing is this: Jews, Christians, Muslims lived in that area together in peace for 600 years before the end of World War One. Under the Ottoman Empire. I'm not saying the Ottoman Empire was great. Don't get me. They've got their own little, things there, like the Armenian Holocaust, and I mean, But the point here is this: how far back do you go, and who's then the victim? So do you feel sorry for the Jews, or do you feel sorry for the Palestinians? Do you feel sorry for the Romans, or do you feel sorry for the cannibal tribes of the Amazon? Who do you feel sorry? At what point do you stop feeling sorry for anyone? Who is not a victim and who is not a brutalizing conqueror? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really do get that. The thing that my point is to do with, all of this discussion is based around our morals, and our morals are vastly dynamic, depending on what happens. And how much we go left or right or backwards or forwards, up and down. Our morals, the line in the sand, if I wanted to put it that way. And I say this, I think, better than I'm going to say it today. I said I wrote it down for Facebook. And that was that comedy allows us to see where the line in the sand is. Because when a comic says something and the audience goes, "Ooh, that's a bit new," or "that's a bit far," all that the comedian is doing is showing us once again where our morals are by crossing the line and dancing and coming back, right? They're not only over there, they're dancing around finding where these lines are, where our moral compass is pointed. And by having the history of these movies still present to be able to download and view or stream or whatever your preference is, you know what? When you watch it, what do you feel when you watch it? When I watch Chris Lilly's work, any of his, is one of the fantastic Australian character actor, does serious and pieces and points out things in our society which is very funny. But all of his work has been removed. So if you want to have a look, Chris Lilly, it's pretty fun. He was applauded by the Tongan community for his work as Jonah, where he actually did not blackface, they call it brownface, I suspect, and they approved it. The Tongan community approved it because he was right on the money with his character. It wasn't a caricature. It was the start at the time, I suppose, right? And it was only done within 10 years ago. And to be able, Becky, there's only, 12 episodes of Fawlty Towers? And to remove one is crazy.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
It really does.
Especially that one. Don't mention.
But isn't that funny? Isn't that what humour does? Is show us where the lines are? And what happens, Meki? Think about this. We'll all turn into snowflakes, right? If we get rid of all of this information, because then a generation from now, there won't be any history of it. It'll all be deleted, because we'll just delete it all, and then we won't know where we came from.
Yeah.
Because what's the first step in knowing where you're going, is knowing where you start from. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. If you don't know your history, this is a much abused and much used phrase. You're doomed to repeat it. But unfortunately, that's completely true. We're making all the same mistakes. I mean, Napoleon invaded Russia in the winter. Germany invaded Russia in the winter. What you do there? It's insanity. You just don't do these things. You don't do them again and again and again. But we're doing it all over again. It's all over. It's not actually new. The only thing that's new here, right? We are now living in an age where we believe the individual matters. We've been taught for the last 200 years the individual is sacrosanct, they matter, right? And now us, being murdered in front of us, and doesn't sit well with us. That's not what we were taught. This is not what it is. If you only hear about it, you go, well, if every single Aboriginal death in custody had been broadcast in the same manner as George Floyd's murder, there would be no more black deaths in custody here in Australia. I guarantee it. Look at what happened, Dave. They're abolishing the Minneapolis police department. Gone. They're going to find something new to do. They've now made outlawed chokeholds. The police is not in New York. In fact, New York City was the first to move that way. And I'm still calling Cuomo is going to go run for president in a couple of years.
I think that would be
completely
pretty wise.
Yeah, absolutely. But the point here is, these are things that are happening, but they're not happening because this is new. George Floyd is a new thing. This has been going on in the States for 200 years.
Yeah, that's right.
For 200 years. This is not new.
Try and fight the police force in court without footage, and you're already guilty. That's right.
What is happening today is unprecedented because we have front row seats to everything all the time.
Yeah.
Completely, and this is what Dave said, is very important here, unfiltered. Completely unfiltered. If you go to the major news outlets, you get filtered news. If some dude in the street films something and then streams it on any social platform, that's what you get. That's it. You get what actually happened. Not some filtered and there's no story picking here either.
That's right. And you can't put a slant to it.
No.
Because what you see is what you get.
Yeah, no editorial oversight. 100%. That's exactly right.
Hey, Mackie, I want to point out this one last thing to do with that Black Lives Matter thing, right? And this was a news article that I found. It's from 7 months ago, but it was the New South Wales government, New South Wales state government, and it said that the New South Wales Anti-Slavery Act could be abandoned despite voting it into law 7 months ago. So that was in November or December, right before Christmas, and they were looking to the first state legislation mandating penalties for Australian companies that fail to address slave labour in their supply chains could be entirely abandoned by the New South Wales government.
Wow.
So, it's crazy. And they're going, well, we can't because we know it's already existing and it means all these products are going to disappear. If we don't, if we want to outlaw it, we're not going to be able to drive cars. We won't get iPhones. We won't get... You know what I'm saying? So they went, oh, maybe we should just delete the law. Let's delete it. It doesn't exist. So this is that thing, Mickey. People take history and they decide, you know what? I think it's better that we just delete this thing. Let's just get rid of it. We can burn some books. It's always time for a book burning, and that's what filtering is on social media.
Absolutely.
So, we've only got a few minutes left, and I just want to really super quickly cover US demands Prince Andrew is handed over to face questions over the Epstein. My goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is a scary topic to touch. All right? Just to begin with, straight away. Because... the Queen is in a position to step down. He's basically because she's so old, she's sort of ready. She tried to hand it over to the son, right? The grandson, and he's gone. You know what? I'm out of here. I'm going to take my wife. We're going to make, clothes. Don't need the money. It's all good. Don't want it. Don't want your dirty money with your dirty things going on.
It's a damaged brand. It
is a damaged brand. They're running from it. And Prince Andrew, if you saw his interview, which was a train wreck, no wonder. They could just use that as evidence. That's enough.
That's it.
But I think that what they want to do is know more. They want to know, more about it, and that's a pretty big call. Whether the palace lets it occur is another story.
But it's a treaty that the US has with the UK.
Yeah, extradition laws.
So essentially, he was subpoenaed. So Prince Andrew, normally you can't really subpoena a foreign national, but because of the treaty they have, it's sort of like a subpoena, meaning you better show up in court or else. And And it doesn't matter if he's the king or the queen or the son of the queen. Completely irrelevant.
You have to give evidence.
It's under the law, right? You have to give evidence. Come in there. Otherwise, they can charge you with contempt of court. At which point you probably couldn't go back to the United States if you wanted to. But the point here is, they're all guilty. I mean, if you watch the documentary, I'm not saying it's, 100% all true or whatever, but I do believe there's a high degree of accuracy in that documentary.
I'm getting through it, Becky. It's pretty tough.
Oh, dude, it is. When you get to the last episode, let me know. And there's a scene in there where this little rat pokes out, and you know what I mean when you see it.
Okay.
And it is compelling though, right? And Netflix, they head off to Netflix for broadcasting it when they did, and they do question his death. They do massive, and this is where the little rat comes in. And it is also clear that he wasn't alone by any stretch of the imagination. Everybody was an enabler. At best, people were enablers by looking the other way. At best.
That's right.
At worst, they were active participants.
And where's the girlfriend?
Oh my! She's in London. She does not. She denies all charges, right?
Wow.
She does. Giselle, her name.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's really astounding that these people and there was an eyewitness person, the IT guy on the island. There was an IT guy. They interviewed the IT guy, and he says, "Yeah, I saw Prince Andrew with that girl. He was fondling her and all that, right?"
Yep.
Yeah, clear as day, right? And he's there a lot, and a lot of people were on the island, and the girls themselves said not all the people that went to the island participated in these activities. They just had lunch there or whatever, and then they went off again, right?
Yeah, of course.
So you can't paint everybody with the same brush. But by George, I tell you, you can paint that brush pretty broadly with a lot of people, and a lot of people are involved here, right? This is not a small undertaking. We're talking potentially thousands of girls involved in this particular network.
Yeah, and it wasn't just there either. It was on multiple continents.
Oh, multiple, but over decades. It was over decades.
Yeah,
Didn't just happen once. It was a sophisticated operation. It was so sophisticated. The legal thing, you've seen this now. The legal things that were brought out that he took advantage of, Epstein and this, completely unprecedented. The sweetheart deal he got, completely unprecedented.
See, but I still think that all the news stories are still, focused on him being dead. So, well, I still have to question that. So every time you say, he didn't kill himself, still is implying that he's dead. And I still think the other thing is open to query that he's quite alive and well, and and that's where that's going to go. Meki, we've only got like 1 minute left or 2 minutes left. So the other one was the North Korean leader's sister has stated openly that she's intending on threatening military action against South Korea. And like I keep saying, it's like someone has a magic wand and has cursed the planet to a war, but everyone has been zapped by it. And that this anger is boiling within so many people, whether the rioters is like shaking a can of Coke and opening it, and for every reason that they have built up, pent up, it gets released. It's like all the countries of the world leaders are no longer vying for peace. War is the only option, and they've got the hammer or the nuclear button. That's the only tool they've got. Well, how can I have peace if I've only got a button in front of me I can press when I get angry at them? Oh, look at that! There's music. I'll do the outro. So, look, it's only a very short break. Take the time to go to the toilet, maybe donate to the station, or subscribe to the archives. We'll see you on the other side of the hour. This is Shiny Side Out. Welcome back to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Meki on freedomslips.com, on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5 US a month. If you're new to Shiny Side Out, welcome aboard. This is a tinfoil hat zone. So keep your arms within the vehicle, turn off your personal reality inverters, and please, no flash photography. We are glad you're on board, and thank you for inviting us into your lives. So follow, subscribe, or otherwise for the appropriate social media platforms. And we're halfway through show number 430, and we're talking about ancient tech. This is part 9 in the series, in the show arc.
Wow. Part 9 already. Jeez.
I know, right? So get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. Maybe an EMP-proof thumb drive with survival documents. Maybe a seed pack. 75,000 seeds, can't lose. And follow the instructions carefully. Mackie, I never thought that while we were talking about, the seed packs and preparing yourself for the worst, that the worst would be here while we're talking about it.
Look,
this is escalating.
Unfolding.
It's unfolding.
Completely. And in fact, while initially I thought it wouldn't be the event. I think now very much that it is. And in order to understand that cryptic remark, I'd really have to go into the hypothesis shows. So have a look at that. Every even 100 shows, you'll get to it. But it is. Now we're looking at, and just very quickly, almost 8 million infected, officially non-infected. Again, is this coronavirus? Is this something else? Not debating it, but something is happening here, right? And 430,000 people have died of it, which I think is wrong. I don't think that's the number. I think the number is much, much higher.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just gonna by averages here. So let's say there's a coronavirus for argument's sake, right? I'm not gonna argue the point, but the US have now undertaken 24 million tests. This is just simple math right now, okay? 24 million tests, and out of those 24 million tests, 2 and a bit million have tested positive, because you only the ones that are positive if you test them, right? So that's 10%. 10% have tested positive, right, for this thing, and let's call it the coronavirus, for want of a better word. Now you can't test everybody, but if we were then to overlay it over the population, that means that 33 million people in the States have this thing, right? Just by doing the math, because 10% of 330 million is 33 million, right? And then if you extend this even further, that means that by now well over 1 million people probably have died from this in the States, right? And we know that more people have died from this thing than are being reported, because only certain sections of people that have died are being reported.
Yeah, the selective criteria.
Correct, right? And none of the knock-on effects have been reported on either, such as strokes, heart attacks, and other things that just organ failures, etc. And we know, at least from New York and other places as well, but definitely from New York, that those things have spiked in recent times.
That's right.
These kinds of incidences, and it's globally. We also know that preliminary studies are showing that we are way above the normal fatality rate for this time of year. Okay, it's like several magnitudes higher than we experienced last year or the year before. So normally a certain number of people die every day. That's just what happens on the world. People die, right? But whenever you have these spikes, with this current event, you can actually follow it. But the spike is higher than what is attributed to this event. Okay, so more people are dying than it's being
it's like 100-fold greater.
Yeah. So this is very much the event that I thought would come in order to prevent the awareness cascade that I thought would happen at 7.776 billion. And it's just ongoing now, right? It's an ongoing thing. But
with awareness, you need information. So the awareness cascade needs people like you and me, Mackie, like the other hosts of the stations, all the other platforms. It needs the social media. It needs everybody thinking the same way. And then this is the other thing. They're starting to delete what we can think about. They're starting to delete what allows us to care, and to change history. It's like we're falling into the Hunger Games or some weird thing where it's only the super elite, everybody else. It's very strange.
For the first time, it is become visible and almost inescapable, like what you just said. It has been very obscured in the past, because things weren't just bad. Things hadn't just hadn't gotten this bad. But now, as you so rightly said, we seem to have transitioned into this alternate Twilight Zone dimension where all of a sudden, what is this? And I say to you this, and to our listeners, it's always been like this. We just didn't perceive of it, or most of us didn't, because it never touched us directly.
Yeah.
Now that it does, all of a sudden the curtain is rolled back, and we're peering into this abyss. Forget the rabbit hole, all right? We're standing at the edge of an abyss, and we're just not equipped to handle that. So we're completely flabbergasted by all the things that are going on at the same time. So this, I loved your initial list of all the things that happening in late 2019 and early 2020.
That's right.
And we're only halfway through it, by the way. Not even, right?
Bring on the alien invasion. That's what
alien invasion. We're up next. I'm so nervous. It's really.
I still have my COVID-19 decorations up.
No, right? And no one told me it was alien invasion.
That's right.
But the thing
what
is,
happened to murder hornets?
But the curtain has been rolled back.
That's right.
In many ways, and some of the responses are callous. What happened in Brazil, and what the president said there is like, I'll mourn the dead. I'll mourn the dead. What else do you mean to do?
I won't actually do anything at all, except for I'll think about how many dead. Yeah, I'm on them.
So we are now
the amount of
staring.
the paper thin. What's Lisa say? The paper thin commitment you have to your family. Well, I'd say the paper thin commitment he has to his constituency.
It's talked through with bacon grease and on fire. That's what's happening here. And funny enough that we should be talking about ancient tech here, because I think very, very strongly that things like this have happened before, and I believe many times. And we've spoken for the last 9 weeks about this in some detail. We've shown you all the smoking guns. We've shown you the evidence of all the things that are all around us that we put into our body every day, we chew on every day. These are all pieces of evidence as to what went wrong. We'll go here from page 41 and talk about ancient agriculture and search of the missing link, because it's best to start it and then go through until the next topic, because we got about 1 page into it. It's really critical for you all to understand that these civilizations that went before us, they have left their footprint and all kinds of prints all over us, all over the place, going back into a time we think is ludicrous to even contemplate. Millions of years into our past, and in some instances, and now this is where I'm going to lose a whole bunch of you, hundreds of millions of years into our past.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're only scratching the surface. Dave, again, I say this a lot in this context. When we first started this, 10 years ago, remember we discussed this, and we said, as we go forward here and we present the research that is out there in the world, I guarantee you that things will move back in time further and further. We will find a lot more of our human ancestors. Yeah, we are. That's exactly what happened. We're pushing timelines much further back of first humans appearing, of agriculture appearing. We pushed it back to 23,000 years ago now, right? As we learned last week, and other things as well. There's this pyramid complex in Indonesia, which is even outmatching Göbekli Tepe by some 12,000 years, 12,000 years older than Göbekli Tepe, or 8 to 12,000. We're not quite sure, right? These are markers that are significant. This is not 150 years or 1,000 years. These are eons. These are the development phases for civilization we're talking about here. Yeah, it took us to get here, and all things being equal, between 5 and 8,000 years. Or thereabouts, right? And we don't really have records going back much further that are any good for anything. We have got evidence that goes back further, but no real records. So we don't know. We think it started about 10,000 years ago. Let's call it. That's when we think it started. What a load of crock! We know this is plainly not true because we've got the evidence, right? We just don't want to. I don't know. We don't want to do it. We don't want to look at it. It's completely discouraged to even be investigated seriously by mainstream science. Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's why we talk about fringe science. And Will Hart here is one of the authors that I really respect, and he did a lot of research into agriculture, and he called this article "Ancient Agriculture in Search of the Missing Link." Is the inescapable? This is the subtitle here. Is the inescapable evidence of a lost fountainhead of civilization to be found growing in our fields? We have today, Dave, if you remember, seed banks all over the world. Right?
Millions of mylar packets.
Bingo.
Containing
if something
seeds.
Was to happen, Yeah,
to
if something were to
reboot
happen to us,
society.
well, so let's say something came along and wiped us out, an asteroid impact, I don't care, whatever, right? But only a few of us left, and maybe some of us remember the seed banks, but we can't get there. It takes us a while to get there, but then we do get to the seed banks, or maybe we find them by accident, or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, agriculture starts.
Bingo.
Out of nowhere, pop, right? What? Well, how? Oh no, we wouldn't be able to explain it because all those seeds in the seed banks, they are actually seeds that you can grow into plants that we can eat,
and they're from all around the world too.
Yeah. And you know what? We have never been able to find the wild varieties of a lot of
the origins.
grains.
And doesn't that seem to make sense?
Yeah,
that we've done this before.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, you look at some of the things that are out there, like some of the plants, bananas.
Yeah,
bananas, pineapples. Okay,
mm-hmm.
There are many others as well where you just shake your head and bananas. They don't do much growing by themselves. It just doesn't happen, right? Good luck finding a banana seed. Okay, but these aren't the only ones. Some of these plants seem to be engineered to be a certain way.
You cut the top of a pineapple and plant it.
Yeah, it's I'm flabbergasted. Now let's now say what Mr. Hart has to say here. One of the most curious aspects of history's mysteries is that I love that. Is that there is anything mysterious to puzzle over at all? There shouldn't be any mysteries, right? Why should our history be full of anomalies and enigmas? We've become conditioned to accept these incongruities. But if we turn the situation around, it really does not seem to make sense. We know the histories of America, Europe, Rome and Greece with some precision back about 3,000 years. I'll give you 5,000 years. Okay? Just as we know our own personal histories. We would consider it very odd and unacceptable if we did not. However, when we go farther back in prehistory, than Babylonia to Sumeria and ancient Egypt, matters become more difficult. There can be few possible explanations. Firstly, our ideas and beliefs about the way history happened conflict with the truth, or plainly wrong. Or two, we have collective amnesia for unknown reasons and/or some combination of both. And Dave and I, subscribe to the combination of both. Mm-hmm. Imagine that you woke up one morning with complete amnesia, no idea of how you got on this planet, and no memories of your own past. Well, that's how we're born here, right? We are in an analogous situation regarding the history of civilization. And it is just as disturbing. 150 years ago, much of the history in the Old Testament was considered to be pure fiction, including the existence of Samaria, which is the biblical Shinar, Akkad, and Assyria. But those forgotten pieces of our past were discovered in the late 19th and early 20th centuries when Nineveh and Ur were found. Their artifacts have completely changed our view of history. Until fairly recently, we did not know the roots of our own civilization. We had no idea who might have invented the wheel, agriculture, writing, cities, or any of the rest of it. Would you simply accept the situation if you had amnesia, or would you do everything in your power to reconstruct your past and your identity? It seems there's something wrong. So there's something we're hiding from ourselves, right? But there's certainly something wrong. Some will say it was a mind-wrenching visit by ancient astronauts. Others will argue there was an ancient human civilization destroyed by cataclysm. In either event, we have apparently buried and forgotten those episodes because the memory is too painful. I say, and I'm sure Dave says something very similar, I think both are true. Both are, and they both are still true. Both the ancient visitor theory as well as ancient human civilization much higher than ours. In fact, continuing to be much higher than ours. It is curious that we have developed the capability to send space probes to Mars and to crack the human genome and even to clone ourselves. But we are still fumbling around trying to understand the mysteries of the pyramid cultures, of prehistory, and of how we made the quantum leap from the Stone Age to civilization in the first place. It simply does not add up. Why should we as a species not have maintained the threads directly and concretely linking us to our past? Additionally, we have not asked all of the right questions. It never hurts to go back to basics and review everything you think you know, and also what the real facts are. The real facts, not the fake facts. After the last ice age, something strange occurred and the human race went through a sudden transformation that sent our race into unknown territory. We are still reaping the consequences of those explosive events. Let us go back and set the stage of early human evolution as science depicts it unfolding. Our ancestors found themselves in a world full of natural wonders, facing the challenges that nature set before them, and all having to do with basic survival. To begin with, they had no tools and no choice other than to meet the challenges head-on, just as other animals would. We had to keep the realities of this background in perspective. We know exactly how Stone Age people lived because many tribes around the world were still living in this manner during the past 500 years, and they have been studied intensively and extensively. We know that humanity was fairly homogeneous throughout the Stone Age. Even 10,000 years ago, people lived pretty much the same way, whether they were in Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, or the Americas. Remember, I'm extolling the official view here. They lived very close to nature, hunting wildlife and gathering wild plants, using stone tools and stone, wood and bone weapons. They had learned the art of making and controlling fire, and they had very accurate and detailed knowledge of the habits of animals, the lay of the land, nature's cycles, and how to distinguish between edible and poisonous plants. This knowledge and their way of life had been painstakingly acquired over millions of years of experience. Stone Age humans have been wrongly portrayed and misunderstood. They were not stupid brutes, and there would be no modern mind and no modern civilization without the long evolution they went through to establish the basis for all that would eventually happen. They were keenly aware, entirely in communion with nature, and unquestionably stronger and more muscularly robust than we are today. Dave?
In reality, the natural world we inherited from Stone Age man was entirely intact. Everything was pristine and virginal as it had been during the millions of years of human evolution. Nature bestowed her bounty upon those early humans, and they learned to live within the natural framework. Viewed from a statistical perspective, the human status quo is the hunter-gatherer culture that we lived in for 99.99% of our existence as a species, at least according to modern science. It is very easy to understand how our remote ancestors lived. Life changed very little and very slowly. Early man adapted and stuck with what worked. It was a simple but demanding way of life that passed on from generation to generation by example and oral tradition. There really does not seem to be much mystery about it, but that all starts to change radically after the last ice age. Suddenly, a few tribes begin to embrace a different way of life, giving up their nomadic existence and settling down, and started raising certain crops and domesticating several animal species. The first steps towards civilization are often described, but never really examined at a deep level. What compelled them to change abruptly? Is it more problematic to explain than we have been led to believe? The first issue is very basic and straightforward. The Stone Age people did not eat grains, and grains are the basis of agriculture and the diet of civilization. Their diet consisted of lean wild meats and fresh wild greens and fruits. We will be looking at the evolutionary discordance from a general standpoint by examining this mismatch between characteristics of foods eaten since the agricultural revolution that began 10,000 years ago and our genus prior 2 million year history as hunter-gatherers. The present day edible grass seeds simply would have been unavailable to most of mankind until their domestication because of their limited geographic distribution. Consequently, the human genome is most ideally adapted to those foods that were available to pre-agricultural man. This presents us with an enigma that is every bit as difficult to penetrate as the building of the Great Pyramid. How and why did our ancestors make this leap? As they had little to no experience with wild grains, how do they know what to do to process them, or even that they were indeed edible? Beyond that, by the time the abrupt appearance of the Sumerian Egyptian civilizations, grains had already been hybridized. which demands a high degree of knowledge about and experience with plants as well as time. If you have any experience with wild plants or fruits, or any experience in farming or of farming, then you know that wild breeds are very different from hybridized cultivars. It is well established that hunter-gatherers had no experience with plant breeding or animal domestication, and it should have taken much longer to go from zero to an advanced state that historians insist it did. And that's this jump he's talking about, the jump from cultivation and farming to the Sumerian cities and Egyptian civilizations. We must ask, where did their knowledge originate? How did Stone Age man suddenly acquire the skills to domesticate plants and animals and do it with a high degree of effectiveness? We find purebred dog species like Seleucus and greyhounds and Egyptian and Sumerian art. How were they bred so quickly from wolves? The following issues, and there's two of them, make the conventional explanations difficult to support. One, mankind's very slow process of progress in the Stone Age, like they're basically the same thing for millions of years. And two, the sudden creation and implementation of new tools, new foodstuffs, and new social forms that lacked precedence. Mackie.
If early humans had eaten wild grains and experimented with hybridization for some lengthy time period and evolved in obvious developmental stages, then we could comprehend it. But how can we accept the scenario of the Stone Age to the Great Pyramid of Giza? Plant breeding is an exacting science, and we know it was being done in Sumeria, in Egypt, and by the ancient Israelites. If you doubt that statement, consider that we are growing the same primary grain crops that were developed by the ancients. That is a strange fact, and it begs close scrutiny. There are hundreds of other possible wild plants that could be domesticated. Why have we not developed new grains from the other wild species of the past 3,000 years? How could they pick the best crops with the extremely meager knowledge that they would have possessed had they just emerged from the Stone Age? They not only figured out all these complex issues, but they also quickly discovered the principles of making secondary products out of cereals. The Sumerians were making bread and beer 5,000 years ago, and yet their very close ancestors, or at least according to anthropologists, knew nothing of these things and lived by picking plants and killing wild beasts. It is almost as if they were given a set of instructions by someone who had already developed these things. But it could not have been from their ancestors because they were hunters and plant collectors. It is very difficult to reconstruct these rapid-fire transitions, especially when they were accompanied by radical changes in every other feature of human life. How and why did humans who had known nothing but a nomadic existence and an egalitarian social structure so quickly and so radically change? What compelled them to build cities and create highly stratified civilizations when they knew nothing about such organizations? During the Epi-Paleolithic, which is the transitional Stone Age area, about 8,000 to 5,500 BCE, the tribes in the Nile Valley, which means before the Common Era, so about 8,000 years ago, the tribes in the Nile Valley were living in semi-subterranean oval houses roofed with mud and sticks. They made simple pottery and used stone axes and flint arrowheads. They were still semi-nomadic and moved seasonally from one camp to another. The vast majority of tribes around the globe were living in a similar state. How do we get from there to quarrying, dressing, and manipulating 1 to 60-ton stones into the world's most massive structure, and in such a short time? We discussed, of course, with all of you, the incredible stone technology that was used by the ancients, and we spent, I think 2 or 3 weeks on this. I mean, if that doesn't shake anyone's belief in traditional science or the traditional viewpoint, I should say, then I don't know what else would. The quick transition is all but impossible to explain rationally. All inventions and cultural developments require time and a sequence of easily identified developmental stages. Where are the precursors? It is very easy to trace this path of development during the Stone Age from very primitive tools to chipped axe heads and flint arrowheads. That is what we should find as civilization develops. But where are the smaller scale pyramids, much smaller in fact? Where are the crude stone carvings that precede the sophisticated stele? The slow evolution of forms from simple to complex is all that human beings knew. Not mud and thatched roof huts, and then large-scale architecture employing megalithic blocks of stone and complex artwork demanding master craftsmanship. But the developmental phases are simply not there. Sumerian cuneiform tablets describe fairly complex systems of irrigation and farming, bakeries, and the making of beer. The Bible tells us that the ancient Jews raised grapes and made wine, and both leavened and unleavened bread. We take these things for granted, but the assumptions underlying them are never questioned. Where did they learn to hybridize bread wheat and turn it into flour and bake the flour into bread in such a short time span? I mean, that's actually a good question. I mean, how you look at a blade of grass and you think cake. Where is that leap? Ditto for viticulture. They are not simple or these are not simple or obvious products. We assume that their ancestors developed farming skills over a prolonged period of time, which is a logical expectation, but that is not the case. The very first and very primitive agriculture experiments that have been documented by archaeologists occurred in Jarmo and Jericho, but as we know now, they go back, several tens of thousands of years further than we thought. These were small, humble villages that raised a few simple crops, but they still hunted and game and they gathered plants, so they were not strictly agricultural communities. The problem is that there's no intermediate step between them and Sumeria and Egypt, just as there's no small-scale ziggurats, pyramids, or any progression showing that Stone Age artisans could suddenly carve intricate statuary and stele. The orthodox theories are starting to rely more on the official pronouncements of authorities rather than on well-argued and well-documented facts. We are now entering the age of dogmatism in science, especially archaeology and history. Right, this is my little 5 cents. We have reached a crisis in the fields of anthropology, history, and archaeology because the conventional theses are unable to solve an increasingly large number of anomalies. The explanations are thin and threadbare and becoming more ponderous and unable to support their own weight. The pieces do not lock together and fit into a smooth, coherent whole. Here's a quote by the eminent paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey. You all know him. He found Lucy. Some years ago, while giving a lecture at university, Leakey was asked by a student about the evolutionary missing link. And this is what he replied. This is Louis Leakey. There is not one missing link. There are hundreds of links missing. This is even more true for cultural than biological evolution. Until we find those links, we are like amnesiacs struggling to make sense out of our modern lives and our collective history. But what he said, again, I want to repeat what Leakey said. There is not one missing link. There are hundreds of links missing. This is coming from Leakey himself, Dave. It's, look, the next section we're going to share with you all the special cases, specifically India and then China, because we contend that obviously if there were forerunner civilizations, or previous civilizations, then there should be some remnants of their knowledge left in some form, shape, or way that bled into civilizations that rose of their own accord at some point. Some people would have remembered things. Somebody would have retained some knowledge somewhere, right? And I think both India and China are in fact good examples of where we think such a transitory knowledge was kept. Dave?
So the special case of India, science, medicine, technology in ancient India. To begin with, the archaeological, there we go, remains, yes, Far out. Remains the Indus Valley reveal the knowledge of applied sciences. Scientific techniques were used in irrigation, metallurgy, making of bricks and pottery, and in measurement of areas and volumes. The artifacts found from the site suggest that Harappans developed metallurgy of copper and bronze about 2500 BC. However, the technological knowledge in India actually had an uninterrupted run since the Vedic age. There was a close relationship between religion and the advancement of technological knowledge. Science and technology in ancient and medieval India covered all the major branches of human knowledge and activities, including mathematics, astronomy, physics, chemistry, medical science and surgery, fine arts, mechanical and production technology, civil engineering and architecture, shipbuilding and navigation, sports and games. Research has shown that from making the best steel in the world to teaching the world to count, India was actively contributing to the field of science and technology centuries long before modern laboratories were set up. Many theories and techniques discovered by the ancient Indians have created and strengthened the fundamentals of modern science and technology. While some of these groundbreaking contributions have been acknowledged, some are still unknown to most. Ancient India was a land of sages, saints and seers, as well as a land of scholars and scientists. Ancient India's contribution to science and technology include... There's a long list, Meki, let's jump one to one. Mathematics. Vedic literature is replete with concepts of zero, the techniques of algebra and algorithms, square root and cube root. Arguably, the origins of calculus lie in India 300 years before Leibniz and Newton.
The astronomy, Rig Veda, 2000, before Christ, so about 4,000 years ago, refers to astronomy.
Physics, concepts of atom and theory of relativity were explicitly stated by an Indian philosopher around 600 BC.
Chemistry. Principles of chemistry did not remain abstract, but also found expression in distillation of perfumes, aromatic liquids, manufacturing of dyes and pigments, and extraction of sugar.
Wow. Medical science and surgery. Around 800 BC, first compendium on medicine and surgery was compiled in ancient India.
Fine arts. The Vedas were recited, and recitation has to be correct, which gave rise to a finer study of sound and phonetics. The natural corollary were the emergence of music and other forms of the performing arts.
Mechanical and production technology. Greek historians have testified to smelting of certain metals in India in the 4th century BC.
Civil engineering and architecture. The discovery of urban settlements of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa indicate the existence of civil engineering and architecture, which blossomed to a highly precise science of civil engineering and architecture and found expressions in innumerable monuments of ancient India.
Shipbuilding and navigation. Sanskrit and Pali texts have several references to maritime activity by ancient Indians.
Sports and games. Ancient India is in fact the birthplace of chess, judo, snakes and ladders, and playing cards. In fact, the tarot is often referred to as having been originated in India.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. It's very few people. In fact, some people believe that the gypsies originated out of India. The gypsies were in fact a traveling Indian tribe, if you will, that had somehow made its way to Europe, and a lot of their arts and so forth came from that. And it's really interesting. So, if you take India now as a focal point of where civilization started again after it was destroyed, maybe even hundreds or thousands of years after it was destroyed, but it retained, or some people retained some of the knowledge upon which, then the emerging civilization could build. At India and China, it's a fairly, you can see it to some extent, right? The mystery lies with civilizations like that of Egypt or Sumer, which just spring up out of nowhere, fully formed. The one interesting thing about India is the language, and that's Sanskrit, a very complex, a very rich language, much more so than our modern languages, and very logical too, very expressive. Again, much more developed, one could say, than our modern languages. It's really very strange that all these things just pop up, and they've got such a head start. I mean, wherever you've got these pockets of knowledge, Dave, or maybe people stumble upon knowledge, or maybe they find books or whatever it might be, right? They can then build on that knowledge and become, ingenious in their own rights. I'm sure that a lot of the inventions that the Indians made, they made of their own volition. But I do also believe there was an initial spark, something that might have survived, from a previous cataclysm. And you know what? Indians will be the first to tell you, oh yeah, history is absolutely cyclical. History we're just repeating the cycles, right? They believe in reincarnation. There's like anything that we say here, an Indian person that grew up in India would have absolutely no problem at all, understanding or even agreeing with, because that's what happened, absolutely, right? I mean, these cycles, these world ages, the yugas, come and go. Civilizations are destroyed, and then they rebuild, and so on and on it goes. And but the funny thing is, Dave, all ancient, or the vast majority of ancient high civilizations, the Maya, the Aztec, etc., the Indians, they all believed in the cyclical nature of history and time. They all believed in these world ages, and that were capped, if you will, by a massive cataclysm that destroyed the reigning order, right? And it wouldn't be a shift that was required to take on that worldview. Only us in the West, through various mechanisms and various accidents of history, believe in the linear progression of history, when clearly this is not the case. We know it is not the case. You look at the Roman Empire, there it was, and then it peaked, and then it completely collapsed, throwing most of Europe into 500 years of dark ages. Yeah. Right? So, and then rising again, here we are, and then, all wonderful things. Imagine if something were to happen, Dave, tomorrow that wiped us out. We discussed it many times, right? Who would survive? I mean, it'd be a random thing who survived. I mean, some powerful people would probably survive, but most of the people that know how things work and how to make things wouldn't survive. None of the manufacturing capabilities would survive, and we are now living in an age. We're living in an age where you can't start from scratch. You need the tools to make the tools to make the tools to make the thing that you need. Right? There's no longer, okay, here's a piece of iron, we make it into a tool. That's no longer the case. It is now a thing that, okay, we have to build this tool out of these things in order to extract the raw materials that we need, and then we have to use those to make the next tool to make another thing that we need to make. High temperature smelters, for example,
upgrades.
to get the ores that we need, and on it goes. Technology. Forget about technology, right? If you start from zero, there's no way just sit there and make a microchip.
Just think, Mickey. Just think straight away about, okay, so where are you going to scavenge enough iron ore to make enough smelted iron in the first place? Right? Because pretty much so much of it is scavenged off the planet that we wouldn't find it. We'd have to start mining. But how do we know where to mine? That technology is lost. Yeah. So, you know that you start with clay, right? And you fire that to be ceramic, and that's only for housing. Before you can make bellows, right? You need the skin of something.
Yeah. You need to understand, pyrotechnics as well. You need to understand that, if you fan a fire,
that's right.
In a confined space, it'll burn hotter. How would you know that? I mean, this is trial and error again, right?
Yeah. So if you could watch the YouTube channel called Primitive Technology, the guy makes all this stuff by hand, and he's slowly evolving his behavior using the tools that he creates, and it's an effort. Like, I can't imagine going past where he is now for a number of generations until you happen to be spread enough to inconsequently turn up with something that wasn't in your region, because it's region specific.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, it's so crazy. So I really have a hard time. Meki, take maths.
Okay, sure. Mathematics represents a very high level of abstraction attained by the human brain, obviously, right? In ancient India, roots to mathematics can be traced back to Vedic literature, which are around 4,000 years old and possibly older. Between 1000 BC and 1000 AD, a number of mathematical treatises were authored in India. And this is when they wrote it down for the first time. They may have been using it for quite some time before that. Will Durand, an American historian who lived from 1885 to 1981, said that India was the mother of our philosophy, of much of our mathematics. It is now generally accepted that India is the birthplace of several mathematical concepts, including zero, the decimal system, algebra, an algorithm, square root, and cube root. Zero is a numeral as well as a concept. It owes its origin to the Indian philosophy, which had a concept of sunya, literal translation of which is void, and zero emerged as a derivative symbol to represent this philosophical concept. Geometrical theories were known to ancient Indians and find display in motifs on temple walls, which are in many cases replete with mix of floral and geometric patterns. The method of graduated calculation was documented in a book named 5 Principles, Panch Siddhantika, which dates to the 5th century AD. A.L. Basham, an Australian Indologist, writes in his book The Wonder That Was India, he writes that the world owes most to India in the realm of mathematics, which was developed in the Gupta period to a stage more advanced than that reached by any other nation of antiquity. The success of Indian mathematics was mainly due to the fact that Indians had a clear conception of the abstract number as distinct from the numerical quantity of objects or spatial extension. Algebraic theories, as also other mathematical concepts, which were in circulation in ancient India, were collected and further developed by Aryabhatta, an Indian mathematician who lived in the 5th century in the city of Patna, then called Pataliputra. He has referred to algebra as Bijaganitam in his treatise on mathematics named Aryabhatya. Another mathematician of the 12th century, Bhaskaracharya, also authored several treatises on the subject. One of them, named Siddhanta Shiromani, has a chapter on algebra. He is known to have given a basic idea of Rolle's theorem, which was the first to conceive of differential calculus.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? It's 800 years ago. In 1816, James Taylor translated Bhaskaracharya's Lilavati into English. Another translation of the same work by English astronomer Henry Thomas Colebrook appeared the following year in 1817. The credit for fine-tuning and internationalizing these mathematical concepts, which had originated in India, goes to the Arabs and to the Persians. Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian mathematician, developed a technique of calculation that became known as algorithms. This was the seed from which modern arithmetic algorithms have developed. Al-Khwarizmi's work was translated into Latin under the title Algoritmi de Numero Indorum, meaning the system of Indian numerals. A mathematician in Arabic is called Hinsa, which means from India. The 14th century Indian mathematician Madhava of Sangaragarama, along with other mathematicians of the Kerala school, studied infinite series, convergence, differentiation, and iterative methods for solution of nonlinear equations. Jyestadevara of the Kerala school wrote the first calculus text, the Yuktibasa, which explores methods and ideas of calculus, repeated only in 17th century Europe, so some 300 years after. The decimal system India gave the ingenious method of expressing all numbers by means of 10 symbols, the decimal system. In this system, each symbol received a value of position as well as an absolute value. Due to the simplicity of the decimal notation, which facilitated calculation, this system made the use of arithmetic and practical inventions much faster and easier. Just to make this a little bit clearer, the Romans Roman numerals, right? Mm-hmm. And they're relatively cumbersome, and they become very, very long and almost unwieldy when you get to rather large numbers. And after 10,000, you know what the Romans said? Many. Okay, it's like saying any number after 10,000 is a lot. And so they had a real hard time, and the Romans were fantastic engineers, right? So it didn't hamper them too much. But numerologically speaking, their system was much inferior to the Indian system, the decimal system. In fact, the Roman system wasn't really a decimal system, right?
Yeah, base 10 is so easy.
Yeah, it is. For us it is. I mean, base 20 is a thing, of course, base 8.
Yep.
In numeral notations, Indians, as early as 500 BCE, had devised a system of different symbols for every number from 1 to 9. This notation system was adopted by the Arabs, who called it the Hind numerals, referring to the Hindi or Indian origins. Mm-hmm. Centuries later, this notation system was adopted by the Western world, who called them Arabic numerals, as it reached them through the Arab traders. So all the numbers we're using today, the 1, 2, 3, and so forth,
yep,
they're actually Arab adaptations of Indian number systems. My favorite sequence are the
it's
Fibonacci
coming next,
numbers.
I know.
I know. The Fibonacci numbers in this sequence first appear in Indian mathematics as Matrameru, mentioned in Pingala in connection with the Sanskrit tradition of prosody. Later on, the methods for the formation of these numbers were given by mathematicians Viranka, Gopala, and Hamakandra, much before the Italian mathematician Fibonacci introduced the fascinating sequence to Western European mathematicians. Why are the Fibonacci numbers important? Because they're a sequence of numbers that appear all over nature. In the growth of the nautilus shell, in the way that the seeds are distributed in the head of a sunflower, to even entire galaxies, right? In the way they spiral. Yeah, exactly. And that's why we took the Fibonacci sequence as the basis for our sequence of years and calculations around the awareness cascade. Binary numbers. Binary numbers is the basic language in which computer programs are written. Binary basically refers to a set of two numbers, 1 and 0 really, the combination of which are called bits and bytes. The binary number system was first described by the Vedic scholar Pingala in his book Chandahasatra, which is the earliest known Sanskrit treatise on prosody, the study of poetic meters and verse. So again, music as well as poetry is very much mathematical in its nature. Chakravarti method of algorithms. The Chakravarti method is a cyclical algorithm to solve indeterminate quadratic equations, including the Pell's equation. This method for obtaining integer solutions was developed by Brahmagupta, one of the well-known mathematicians of the 7th century CE, Common Era, about 1300 years ago. Another mathematician, Yayadeva, later generalized this method for a wider range of equations, which is further refined by Bhaskara II in his Bijaganita treatise. Ruler measurements. Excavations at Harappan sites made from ivory and shell, marked out in minute subdivisions with amazing accuracy. The calibrations correspond closely with the Hasta increments of 1 3/8 inches, traditionally used in the ancient architecture of South India. Ancient bricks found at the excavation site have dimensions that correspond to the units of these rulers. Dave?
Yeah, now we have astronomy. Ancient India's contributions in the field of astronomy are well known and well documented. The earliest references to astronomy are found in the Rig Veda, which are dated 2000 BC. During the next 2500 years, by 500 AD, ancient Indian astronomy has emerged as an important part of Indian studies, and its effect is also seen in several treatises of that period. In some instances, astronomical principles were borrowed to explain matters pertaining to astrology, like casting of a horoscope. Apart from this linkage of astronomy with astrology in ancient India, science of astronomy continued to develop independently and culminated into original findings like, and as 4 points, the calculation of occurrences of eclipses, determination of Earth's circumference, theorizing about the theory of gravitation, and determining the sun was a star and determination of a number of planets under our solar system. The Pleiades hold a prominent place as the mothers or wet nurses of the newborn infant in one of the most ancient and central Hindu myths, that of the birth of the war god, Rudra, Skandra, depending on which way you'd like to work that, who evidently represents, among other things, the victorious rising sun. And as the venerable sun, the new year, the Pleiades are said to have been the wives of the 7 sages, who are identified with the 7 stars of the Great Bear. I think that we call them the 7 sisters. The Great Bear's old Tamil name, Illumine, 7 star, corresponds to the combination of the pictograms 7 plus fish, which alone constitutes the entire text of the finely carved Indus seal. The Satapatha Brahmana states that the 6 Pleiades were separated from their husbands on account of their infidelity. Other texts specify that only one of the 7 wives, Arundhati, remains faithful and was allowed to stay with her husband. She is the small star, Alcor, in the Great Bear, pointed out as a paradigm of marital virtue to the bride in the Vedic marriage ceremonies. Evidence of the Harappan origin of this myth is provided, among other things, by Indus seals, which show a row of 6 or 7 human figures. Their female character is suggested by the one long plait of hair, which to present day has remained characteristic of the Indian ladies. 6 minutes or 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Yeah, I don't think we'll manage physics. So let's just have a bit of a recap here then.
All right.
But physics is really interesting, and certainly the concept of the atom, which also goes back to ancient Indian times. So again, why are we talking about India and next week China? Because again, we believe that if there were civilizations prior to this one, then some knowledge must have survived. As I'm sure some knowledge will survive the coming cataclysm whenever that hits us, right? It's just the nature of the beast that some things will be remembered. Maybe books will be found, maybe libraries, who knows, right? But something will survive somewhere. And so the oldest civilizations, therefore, should show some of that ancient knowledge. And what we haven't discussed yet are, the Vedic systems, the medical, the Ayurvedic medical traditions of India, the chakras, the energy flow circles, acupuncture in China, the understanding of the chi and the natural flow of energies, yet again, even in things like what was it called when you do things in the house? It's escaped me at the moment. But the point is that these ancient sciences of energy flows and energy systems and energy points in the body, in the world, everywhere, that are really, they smell of an ancient knowledge, an ancient tech that we laugh at today. Not long ago, people laughed at acupuncture, they laughed at Ayurvedic medicine, and now the more we go on, the more interested we become. Because our penicillin solution to everything is slowly failing, simply because we've overused it, right? And now we're looking at ancient methods of doing things, and believe it or not, both the Indian and Chinese cultures believe that we should lead good lives. Feng Shui. Thank you very much, Dave. Feng Shui, the energy flow in your house and so forth. And they believe that we should, it's one thing to manage your disease. You should avoid your disease. So Western medicine specifically manages your condition. All right, it doesn't necessarily heal it. For the most part, we're being managed. Whereas the Ayurvedic as well as the traditional Chinese medicine practitioners will seek to remedy the underlying causes for you. They will seek to make you better, and it takes a longer time, it takes more effort. In fact, you should be in that bad state in the first place, but it is not about pain management. Because in Western medicine, Dave, they'll give you a painkiller, right? They haven't
That's
done
right.
away. They haven't done away with the cause of the pain. They've
It's
simply
still there.
suppressed your receptors. Right? That's what happened here. So you're still sick. You're still sick, but you can no longer feel it. You got a flu. They suppress your symptoms. In fact, all the things that your body does, and the immune system in your body reacts to disease. That's being suppressed. Because fever is actually a good thing. Fever is there to kill whatever is trying to make you sick, like a virus or bacteria. Right? That's why your body raises its temperature. It's a defense mechanism. But what we do in the West is, we suppress the fever. Right? We suppress the symptoms. And they don't go away. I mean, we're hoping that the immune system does its thing while we suppress the symptoms, but not always the case. Not always the case. It is really mind-boggling that we've gone as long as we have and not really given any credence to these ways of life, because you have to look at how long people live in these countries, in China and India, right? Very, very, very long. We need to look at all the ancient cultures, in the Caucasus Mountains. In fact, most mountain people live a long time. It's because they're very active physically. All right, look at what people eat as well. Right, your whole lifestyle. The ancient medicine systems, they look at your lifestyle. And they're trying to help you. And there's the music. This is Listener Fun on Radio. Please don't go away. Gerber is coming in with an awesome roundtable, I'm sure. So please support him. And thank you very much for all your time listening to us, Dave.
Absolutely. And last week, the thing I couldn't remember was Mount Sinai. So that's all good. Take care. See you next week.